Well, hello world. Welcome to Raccoon Point Studios. I'm Sean Bombs, and today I'm going to talk about the most least controversial subject in pro audio, summing mixers. And nobody's ever gotten into an argument online that's lasted for years talking about this subject. So hopefully this goes okay. So I am not going to try to sell you on the idea of getting a summing mixer. I'm just telling my experience, and I just want to give you one reason why summing mixers could be useful to anyone that has a recording studio. And that being that if you track multiple instruments or guitars, for instance, or bass guitars, for instance, that you can use the summing mixer to sum more than one microphone together and get it into your DAW on one channel, as opposed to recording 3 mics at a time, 2 mics at a time, and then having to deal with all that stuff in the DAW. And then you're running into other issues later on. Say you have you tracked a guitar with 2 microphones, you have them lined up perfectly in the DAW, everything sounds great to you, and you don't have them grouped or something like that, and somebody else comes in and changes something in the mix, and all of a sudden now the guitar is not sounding right, and you don't know exactly where you had your faders aligned and all that stuff, and now you're second guessing everything you do because of that. So that's one reason. That's the main reason. That's why I made this video right now, is because I find it very important if you track guitars. If you combine things like that, it can make things a little bit easier. So that's what I did prior to having the recording console. I had the Dangerous D-Box, the original one, and I got that for a few reasons. Mainly the first reason, well, not mainly. I got that for a few reasons. One was because I wanted to try this analog summing. The other one was because it had really good headphone outputs, and it had a talkback and monitor controlling. I needed a monitor controller at the time. I had the Apollo original, and I needed a way to control 2 sets of speakers, and I think the original Apollo, I wasn't a fan of the headphone outputs or the D to A conversion on that thing. The mid-range was really hard and gritty to me, and the D-Box has D to A conversion, which completely fixed that issue for me, and I was able to hear better with less fatigue. It was a cleaner sound. The headphones all sounded way better using the D-Box, because the gain on that was it was really loud without it distorting things. And you also had the ability to choose different sources with it, as well as summing. So I got to try the summing, and I had already had a few pieces of hardware, and I was able to throw the hardware in between the outputs of the Apollo and the inputs of the D-Box, and therefore I could do parallel compression with my drum stems, and that's how I treated it. I didn't treat it like a full-on console at the time. I treated it as my buses, basically. Granted, it was only 4 of them, but I was doing a lot of rock stuff, and I didn't have 100,000 channel count. You know what I mean? So, and I use Pro Tools, so just so I grew up using Pro Tools, and so that's what I know. And I have tried other DAWs that I like, and I like other DAWs, but at the time I knew Pro Tools, and I didn't have Pro Tools Ultimate or HD or whatever, and if you don't have any kind of hardware latency compensation. So if you go out and come back in and you're doing parallel compression, you will have phasing, and then you have to figure out how to line all that up and do the math and all this crap, and I don't have time for all that. So that D-Box, I love that D-Box, man. I love that D-Box. That thing was, I didn't even want to get rid of it when I got the console, because it was one of those pieces of gear that I fell in love with, that changed it changed my outlook on this. It just changed a lot for me. That and the Apollo, because the Apollo gave me the ability to track with plugins, and do the way I like to do things, is commit things and get my sounds going in. I don't like to do a lot of tinkering after the fact, unless it's just like, the things we need to do to make a mix sound good. But you know what I'm saying, I don't want to record something completely dry and flat and this way and that way, and then completely rearrange it later on and all that stuff. I'm into manipulating and getting my things while we're going and making it sound good on the spot. So when it comes to mix time, we already have the vibe, and we can go from there. So that being said, using the D-Box to record multiple mics was awesome, because I would do that all the time. I use a 421 and a Shure 57, sometimes an SM7B. And sometimes I would even have a stereo room mic or something, depending, on what I was recording as far as guitar. Maybe it was like a dissonant lead or something like that. And sometimes I would do that, and then I could put all that into the all the channels, route them to the D-Box, and then they just either, if it's stereo, then I could come in on one stereo audio track, as opposed to 4 different tracks, and then having to maintain that later on. And I do that a lot with recording guitars, at least two mics, and it's very, very useful. I don't like to have a million tracks going on. So there's that. And then I ended up, I liked summing. I like doing that. I like mixing that way. So I ended up getting a Apollo 16 and a D-Box LT. And then I was using all that. But I never really needed to do 24 channels of summing or anything like that. I just didn't feel like it was I didn't feel like I was always gaining anything. I think 16 channels is perfect, for that kind of stuff, for me anyway. Just treat it all as like buses and whatnot, especially with that. With the console I do it different, but I didn't have sends and buses and stuff like that with the D-Box LT. And then I had the D-Box Plus, which was even better because it had the transformer, and it had 2 other things. I can't remember what they were, but it had different things that you could do to add flavor, and that was really cool. So that's something that is an actual summing mixer that's not just wires, that you actually can do things to make it sound different or add hair and analog goodness or whatnot, all the stuff that people say. So I'm not here to sell you on summing at all. Like, I think people get awesome mixes without it, and I like to do it. I prefer mixing on the console and with outboard gear, and it's more than just sound to me, but it's also just the hands-on stuff. But I see the pros and cons of both. Like in this day and age, like, am I really gonna mix somebody's record out of the box if I'm not getting paid to sit on it for a while? Because that's the main thing. Like, if you're paying me to mix out of the box, and then I'll keep your session up and everything. I won't touch for however long until you actually okay a mix or something like that. But in this day and age, you do a mix, everything's awesome. 8 months later, can you turn the background vocals down in the 3rd verse, just at the last part of the 3rd verse? And you're just like, so it's like, it really depends on clients. Now, I'll mix my band on the console all the time, because I know that it's only 2 other people, my wife and my drummer, and I say, hey, okay this or don't okay it, you know what I mean? And I can leave everything up. But I say all that to say this. I was just looking at different summing mixers, just see what was going on lately, because I haven't really been in that game for a while, especially since I've had the console. I've had this console, I don't know, 5-6 years or something. Maybe? Yeah, something like, yeah, five years. And I just wanted to see what was going on out there, because I just, I really wanted to show people or talk to people about, blending their microphones and not having 20,000 tracks, to have to deal with. And so I was looking, and I saw the new Dangerous D-Box, which is amazing looking. And then they had a smaller Dangerous 2-bus that was kind of like the Plus but smaller, a 1-rack thingy. And I know they have all these other companies have them, but then I saw the SSL SiX, and I was like, man, if I was starting now and I was looking into it with, if I was starting over or whatnot, I think I would get the SSL SiX. Like, I know before I got the API, I wanted the API box, but they only had the 4-channel input one, and then after I got this, they came out with the 8-channel one, and whatever. This thing's amazing. The 8-channel boxes looks awesome. I would totally get that if I was starting over and I had the money. But I think for anybody that's interested in summing or wants to have an ability to track in a different way than they do now, just from interface or whatever way you do it, this SSL SiX is really freaking awesome. I can't even believe it. Like, I wasn't paying attention to any of this stuff, so like I just looked at it, and I remember seeing like stuff here and there. Like, I looked at this and I'm like, you got 2 inputs with 72 plus gain, so you have 2 awesome mic preamps. You have, it could be high Z, it could be line input, and then you have faders with it, and then you have filters and some kind of compressor here and all that stuff. So you have, and then you have Q-Sends. It's, monitor controller, 2 sets of, kind of like the D-Box had, and then you have your headphone out and some stereo inputs here for just line level stuff. Or you could send microphones. If you have outboard preamps, you could send that to there, and then boom, boom, you have, say maybe a stereo set on overhead drums, and then you can, then you have a fader to get your levels right and everything like that. So you get a little extra control there, but just the ability you get here, sending synths through it, sending multiple mics through it, and then from what I read, it said 12 summing channels on Mixdown. That's pretty dope. I mean, I see this G-Series bus comp here. I don't imagine that it'll be as good as the real G-Bus compressor, but it's nice to have it, and I'm sure it's useful on certain things. So now, I haven't tried it. I have not had this in the studio at all, but it definitely piqued my interest. It's definitely got a lot of features that I cannot even believe, and it's only $1,300. That's crazy. But you have an insert here, so I guess that's for your main output. Which summing mix, like the D-Box, didn't have an insert point. You just had your stuff on the 2-bus mix, and that was it. You couldn't really, if you wanted to take in and out, like to hear before and after, and you had a compressor and an EQ, you couldn't do that. You would have to go to wherever the hardware was and do both of them at the same time. And some of that stuff is not as easy depending on the style of EQ. You might hear noises when you're doing it, and having one little button can help that. So anyway, I just really was thinking about this, and that's all I wanted to do. It's just, there's more to summing mixers than just the summing aspect of adding your whole mix into it. You can use it for so many more things than just that, and especially nowadays when they have them mixed in with a monitor controlling thing. So this is really a mini console, if you will. Same thing with that D box, is kind of like a monitor controller. It's a center section, you know what I mean? It's like a shrink down center section, but you get a few other things that you can do with it, and that's where the value comes in. You know, it's not just about the summing and the sound, but when you add functionality to the mix, no pun, but when you add functionality to it, then it makes more sense. You know what I mean? If you just were like, oh, I'm going to spend $5,000 on 16 inputs that just go to down this wire to the 2 outputs, and there's I don't know what they actually put at the end of those. Is it a few resistors and you know what I mean? Like, if it doesn't have anything at the end, I don't know that much, but then that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? I understand that argument too. But if it's for incorporating different pieces of hardware, different microphones for blending, if you need a monitor controller at the same time so you can switch speakers, or if it gives you the ability to also have better outputs for headphones and stuff like that, then it makes more sense. Then it starts to make more sense, you know? So this is just to give any information to anybody who's been even thinking about this stuff. I'm not sure how relevant this conversation is anymore. Not sure if people still talk about this stuff anymore, because I don't really go on forums like that anymore. I used to a lot, mainly just to read. I didn't really participate back then, but so hopefully this was useful in some way to somebody out there. If it was, hit the like. Maybe somebody else will find use out of this. If you want to join the conversation, hit the comment section down below. If you're into this kind of stuff, we do guitar recording, guitar pedals, synthesizers, drum machines, music production, and stuff like this. So if you're into that, please hit the subscribe, hit the bell to stay notified, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.